Hello, I'm Farrokh Langdana. I'm a professor in the Finance and Economics Department at Rutgers Business School and the director of the Rutgers Executive MBA program known as the Powerhouse. So, welcome to the Powerhouse. Today, the topic is going to be tariffs, trade wars, especially anti-dumping duties. And the target's going to be China, the US and China. And it's going to be the steel and aluminum tariffs. And I'm going to give you just as much theory that you need to really understand this. We're going to try and demystify it all. And I'm going to end with what it looks like, what the future looks like, how this is going to end maybe. All right, so stay with me here. And here we go. Two sets of countries. We have a type A country here and a type B country. And here is the price at home. In a type A country, this is the quantity, and this could be steel. Choose whichever of so-called offending trade item that you have in mind. Tires, solar panels, there are a whole bunch of them, dishwashers, and on and on and on. Lumber, here we go. So we're going to try and focus on steel, but all these could apply. So here's the price in a type A country, and I'll explain type A and type B in a second. And here is the price in a type B country, P0B and P0A. And here is quantity, and again steel, etc. The same goods. So a type B country, type A country, you can see the price is lower, obviously. The price here is higher. And without getting into too much detail, for those of you who have done international trade, maybe with me, this is classic David Ricardo right here. This country makes steel more efficiently, maybe tires, lumber more efficiently. It has a comparative advantage in making steel. That means it makes steel more efficiently, or the opportunity cost, if you remember your trade, is lower in making steel. So the price of steel here is lower. The price of steel here is higher. This country does not make steel and tires and solar panels as efficiently as this one. So the price here is higher. It does not have a comparative advantage, according to David Ricardo. Anyway, so two different prices. Type A countries. So type A countries are a bunch of countries that kind of look like this. They kind of can make steel cheaper than America. This could be China. So it could be China, South Korea, Japan, just to name a few, Poland maybe. And so that's these guys here. Type B country is the US. Let's just keep it simple. So here we are now. Let's be Chinese for a second. We want to somehow be the steel gods. We want to somehow be the main ones in steel. So let me just back up here a bit. Here is the world price. Here we go. So the world price of steel. So P world, and here we go, P world. So basically the world price of steel is the average of what these guys are selling. And you can see that the world price of steel is a little higher than China's maybe, and at home, and definitely lower than America's. So here is the world price, this line, horizontal line here. This is domestic demand in China. This is domestic supply. This is domestic demand in America. This is domestic supply. And here is the world price, and you can see from here to here, that's the Chinese demand. From here to here, that's the Chinese supply. And right here, these are China's exports of steel. Okay, so here to here supply, here to here domestic demand, the excess is the exports. And right here to here domestic demand for steel in America, here to here domestic supply of steel in America, and these are American imports. So here we are, that's the imports we get, our imports of steel, those are China's exports. Now here is where it gets interesting. China wants to push these guys out of the market. China says we are going to be the steel gurus. We are going to own steel. We're going to grab a larger market share of America. Could be steel, could be lumbers, tires, solar panels, name it. So let's say this price world here is 10. Okay, that's 10. And China says, what if we can sell to the Americans at 5? Here is where it begins. So they are selling at 5. So what has happened here is the Chinese government has given export subsidies to its steel producers, solar panels, tires, dishwashers, okay? Money under the table. It's illegal, supposedly, according to WTO, it's illegal. So Chinese producers, exporters of steel are getting $5 under the table. It's an export subsidy. So this could be free rent, could be a discount, a rebate on power. It could be simply lower taxes across the board. Often these are well hidden. And so China is selling its steel at 5. And look at what's happened. They have captured a greater share of America's imports. So now this is 5. And the South Koreans, the Japanese, the Poles are going, what the heck, we can't compete with 5. They drop off. They fall out. They do other things. And China has grabbed the bulk, a larger share of US imports. Keep in mind here, very important, Chinese consumers in China still pay 10. It's only Chinese exports that are getting 5. So you have to understand this. The Chinese domestic economy is subsidizing this. So if I'm Chinese buying steel bolts, it's $10 a bolt. If I'm Chinese exporting steel bolts, well, I can export for 5 and I'm getting $5 under the table from the Chinese government. And keep in mind, much of this sector is already owned by the government, the SOEs, the state-owned enterprises. So here we go. You're looking at this and going, hey, wait a minute, Professor Langdana, something's wrong here. The imports have increased, but the exports look smaller. And yep, so here we are, what's supposed to happen, and this is called strategic trade. The demand and the supply, the domestic supply of steel is supposed to go up. And look at this here. The exports have actually increased. So what you have is more new steel mills come into the picture. There are more steel grants. There's more rebates on research in steel. There are more tax breaks on new steel companies. So you're fostering, you're managing the export sector to grow in steel. So the steel domestic supply is supposed to increase. This is what's known as strategic trade. You actually created a bigger export sector in steel by virtue of this under-the-table subsidy. So here's it. By the way, this part here, the shift works very rarely, but nevertheless, it's tried over and over again. So here we are, more exports. They've captured more imports. These guys, according to the plan, are going to spin away and do some other things. China's going to be the head honcho in these imports. And now here we go. People making steel in this country are going to go, what the heck? I mean, what the heck? How can we compete with this 5? That's not fair. And so they will ask for an anti-dumping duty. And here, this is what the fuss is about. Dumping duty of $5. So $5 per bolt, steel bolt, let's say. So dumping, let's first define dumping. Dumping is supposed to happen when one country sells in another country at a price lower than what it sells at home. So if a steel bolt is costing $10 at home, which it is, and it's costing $5 in America, and if it's the same steel bolt, which is another big issue, then A, China, is said to be dumping steel in B. That's dumping. Dumping is when you're selling in a foreign country at a price lower than what you're selling at home consistently over long term. That's dumping. And so here we are, domestic producers of steel are complaining, that what the heck, footwear, I forgot footwear, textiles, clothing, dumping, dumping, dumping. Come on, help us out. Slap on an anti-dumping duty of $5 to at least bring it back to 10 and allow us some more wiggle room. Now, why doesn't Trump call it an anti-dumping duty? Why does he call it something else? Well, this isn't exciting. I mean, it doesn't sound as good to his base, like we're gonna levy an anti-dumping duty on Chinese steel. It doesn't sound as good as we're gonna nail China. I'm going to be tough on China. And so, hence the tariffs. But this is technically what is being proposed. And I should point out that we are one of the, maybe the only country that can do this unilaterally. Other countries have to go through WTO, and it's a big process. We are the only country where the president can nail, quote unquote, another country with this unilateral anti-dumping duty. I mean, it goes under things like Section 201, Super 201, but basically this goes back to 1974, where the US and the US only can unilaterally and with really no discussion slap this on another country. So very controversial. The rest of the world hates this. How can we Americans don't go through WTO when we have to go through the process, blah, 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 you know? So now another point I want to make is a country, we, the US, can do this Super 201 only when we can prove injury. Because, you know, dumping by itself is great for our consumers. Hey, if I want to buy a steel bolt in America and you're selling me one for $5, dump away, you know? So you have to prove injury. Domestic steel workers have to say, hey, 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 we're losing jobs, we're dying here. And so that's another thing. You must prove dumping, which is hard to prove because sometimes the quality of steel is different. Tires, solar panels, we have different specifications, very hard to prove. So you have to prove dumping and you have to prove damage. And then you can Super 201 them or Special 201 them and try and get this back up. Now, another important point, the other country always has 30 days. This is actually Article 19 of the Trade Act of 1974. That's where this comes from. The other country has 30 days. And 95% of the time, the other country has complied. This is a negotiation, you know. So, you know, they say, okay, fine, you know, we won't subsidize as much, but can you maybe sell us some of the Dreamliners a little cheaper? Or can you maybe not subsidize your Dreamliners that much, you know? So you have a little trade thing going on behind the scenes, and often on day 28, 29, this thing quietly peters away, it just peters out. So these things have a lot of attention when they are announced. The stock market swings all over the place, and then on day 29, typically these things have ended with a whimper. And I'm hoping that's what happens here, because as my producer and the director of this video, Maurice Hunter, asked me before the session, he said, well, Professor, what about the fact that about the capital flows? We owe them money. And I went, exactly. And you have to understand and remember is that 65% of all the money China has made since Deng Xiaoping cracked open that door in 1979, it used to be 75% of all the money they have made, all the stuff they've sold us, is in green pieces of paper, is in US dollars. So now it's 65%. So their savings are in our currency, okay? Treasury bonds, treasury bills, companies, just name it, housing, name it, mostly treasuries. And so basically when I'm in China teaching there, or when I'm going there with my executive MBAs from Rutgers, the Chinese like to say, we are not two countries, we are one country. We are called Chimerica, you know? And so the bottom line is that they will do nothing to damage the dollar. They will do nothing to invoke or propagate or worsen a major trade situation. It can't. It'll hurt both of us. Certainly their savings. And as long as both policymakers in both countries understand the Chimerica, that behind the trade we are tied together by capital flows, which no one talks about really, but which to me are as important. So as long as both parties and both policymakers understand that, there won't be a blowout. We won't melt down. And something interesting happened. We had a spouse and partner event for my executive MBAs, and one of the spouses asked me, we were discussing macro, and she said, yeah, but that's a big assumption, Farrokh. What if policymakers there, and more importantly, policymakers here, don't get this relationship? And they're jingoistic in a trade sense, and combative unnecessarily, and playing to some base that says, yeah, we're going to nail China. What if they don't get that? And normally I would have dismissed a comment like that and said, come on, they will get it, they know what's going on. But the terrifying thing is, one really hopes now that they get it in this day and age. And so we're in a situation where a total meltdown cannot happen. It shouldn't happen, but it might happen. and we are hoping it doesn't happen, you know. So there you are, strategic trade there, dumping here, anti-dumping duties, which is what Trump has been trying, but it's not exciting enough. People don't call it that. Two reasons, two factors, two conditions for anti-dumping duty is you have to prove dumping and prove damage. We are the only country that can do this unilaterally. It's called a Super 201. Rest of the world hates that. And again, remember folks, day 30, so day 29 after this whole thing was done, let's hope we can celebrate and quietly enjoy the fact that it's going to whimper out. One hopes. In the meantime, I want to thank you again for visiting the Powerhouse, and I look forward to seeing you all at the next video blog. Thank you. Thank you.